Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Hello.
Yep.
Welcome to South by Southwest Gaming, right?
Let's do it. All right. So we are here to talk about hype, right?
Who doesn't like to get hyped on TV?
Yeah. Not only just hype. We're here to talk about hype specifically as it applies to games marketing. I don't know, Jeff, do you want to talk a little bit about hype in general?
I'm in the business of hyping you. Hopefully not too much, just the right amount. My mic is off. Now it's on. Test 1, 2. Mic's on. Test 1, 2. Dynamite fails out. Good.
Comes very quick.
Channel 2. Test 1, 2. All right, back up, Mike. Here we go. You guys can hear me.
Which mic is that?
Test 1, 2. Oh yeah, there we go. Woo! Let's get this show started. I feel powerful. Yes, we're going to talk about hype in video games today. Something I'm in the business of doing across all our shows that we do throughout the year. For those of you who don't know, my background is I was a journalist for a long time, worked in television, and now do a lot of video game live streamed events, which some of you may watch or participate in, including the Game Awards in December, and December Game Fest in June, I'm working on now, and Gamescom over in August in Germany. So yes, we are in the business of working with gaming companies to get people hyped up, and Greg and his agency is one of the best groups that helps people hype up their games and build trailers and assets and content. So we don't make the games, but we help people bring the games to fans and hopefully delight everyone in the process. Oh, now he's off. Here, just take it.
Okay, there we go. Great. So before we jump in, did you want to share a little bit about your history, coming up, how you came up into this?
Yeah, pass the mic back to me. So my background was the only job I've ever had in my career is working in the video game industry. So I started when I was a kid. I was lucky enough to have a lot of computers and stuff growing up in Toronto, Canada. And I was lucky enough to play games. And then I loved the games I grew up loving were the old adventure games from Sierra Online and LucasArts. If you remember games like King's Quest, and Space Quest, Leisure Suit Larry, Monkey Island, and games like that. So I played those a lot when I was a kid. And one day I decided to write a letter to the company, Sierra Online, that made those games. And I just wrote them a letter. I sent it in post mail to them in Oakhurst, California, from Toronto, Canada, asking them, how do you make your video games? I never expected to get a response, but I got a letter back from them saying, thank you so much for your interest. would you like to help us beta test one of our upcoming video games? It seems like you're really into them. And I said, yeah, it's amazing. So I was 12 years old, and I got to play a pre-release version of a game called EcoQuest 2. And I was also on an early internet, this is pre-internet, right? This is in the early 90s, on an early internet service called CompuServe. And I was on the forums there talking about these games. And because I had beta tested the game, when it came out, I was already an expert and I already knew all the hints and tips on how to get through it. So I started posting all these tips for people online about it. And a guy who was an editor of a video game magazine happened to be on the forum and said, wow, this person seems to know a lot about these games, seems really intelligent, so let me email him. And he emailed my CompuServe address, which was 74227, 127, and asked me if I wanted to write for his video game magazine. So that started with me kind of writing about video games and video game magazines all throughout kind of high school and college. And then from there, transitioned to some more work in bigger magazines like Entertainment Weekly and Time and Fortune. And then I kind of transitioned to doing a lot of television work on, you guys probably familiar with G4 and the TV network. Spike TV, so I did that for about a decade and moved from kind of print to television and video about games. And then in 2014, decided to go off on my own because I thought the television world was quickly moving to the live streaming world of YouTube and Twitch. And I started my own company in 2014, which built the Game Awards. It was a big award show that we had done a version of it on television on Spike TV called the Video Game Awards. But I really wanted to do something that was kind of my own version of that wasn't sort of subject to all the sort of rules and regulations of how you have to make a big television show. So I started that in 2014, and then for the past decade, we've just basically been building that show into one of the biggest live streaming events now on the internet. Up to 154 million people around the world watched it last year. So we do that in December, and then we do a new thing in June, which is kind of like this new show in the period of E3 that got canceled, a couple years ago. So we did a thing called Summer Game Fest that happens in June. And yeah, I basically built these big live events in partnership with the gaming companies and hopefully with the audiences. And we hype people, and people have high expectations. So we don't always deliver against those expectations, but we love it, and it's fun for me really to be able to create these events that can hopefully get people hyped about games.
Amazing. Oh, great.
You're back. You're on now, Greg.
I hear it.
We got a talk show now.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. I'll spend a minute. And,
Yeah. Who are you, Greg? I've known Greg for probably 25 years, something like that.
Yeah. We both came up, sort of around the same time.
Slow.
In games journalism, kind of helping, working with brands and shaping those conversations.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just
my path into the game space was definitely not similar to yours. Was it really a straight line?
Give me a thumbs up.
Or was it conventional? For me, it started in my early 20s. I was working at my dad's investment company. I was going to UCLA in Southern California, and I was making way more money than someone at that age should have been making at the time. For me, video games, kind of like you, Jeff, were a passion, something that I grew up with. I had a love of ever since the original Atari 2600. And during that time, where I was spending all of that sweet discretionary income was not on rent or clothes or food, but I was spending it on something much more important, which was video games. Specifically, video games at this little import game store located in California, or in Southern California. But as life often does, and is wont to do, it threw a curveball my way. One of my dad's businesses at the time went catastrophically bad. And literally overnight, my world kind of got flipped upside down. And at the tender age of 22, I was forced to file for bankruptcy and had to drop out and quit school. And everything that I had planned for kind of just vanished. But something unexpected happened. The owner of that game store offered me a job. And just like that, my hobby and passion kind kind of evolved into what will ultimately be a lifelong career. So really quickly, just indulge me for another minute or so. At that job, we kind of started out simply. We were making these fun and unique ads that we would put in magazines to promote and sell import games. And for those of you, the few of you who might be a little older in here, might remember this is pre-Amazon, where you actually had to call and place an order and then send in a check, a personal check, and then wait for that check to clear. And, wait for 3 to 4 months to get your product. Anyway, I digress. Those ads that we were making kind of evolved into us making catalogs, and those catalogs eventually evolved into us launching successful video game magazines. And we were this group of very passionate gamers who might not have really had the best business sense, really, but we understood what excited people about games and how to tap into that excitement and translate it into content that generated hype and sold product. And so basically there was another curveball kind of waiting in the wings called the internet. And it turns out in the magazine business, it is pretty much impossible to compete with fast and free. And so that business model that we had created was no longer sustainable. And I had to make a choice, either adapt or fade away. So in 2004, I pivoted. I started Off-Pace with the grand business plan at the time to work in my pajamas, in my living room, writing marketing copy by leveraging the deep relationships I'd made with the brand marketers and the PR teams, over the years. And so basically, fast forward 20 years, that one-man copywriting gig has transformed into a global full-service creative agency. And we really do get the absurd pleasure of working with some of the biggest names in the industry. The really funny thing is though, the same core principles, this is where I get to bring it back to hype, the same core principles that applied when we were making those scrappy video game ads still apply today. The tools might be different, we have cinematic trailers, influencer campaigns, TikTok trends, immersive live events, but the essence of hype is still about capturing attention, building anticipation, and really connecting emotionally with your audiences. So that's what you and I are here to talk about today.
All about the hype.
Yeah.
What game are you guys most hyped for now? Yell it out.
Death Stranding.
Nice. Panel coming up. You going?
Speaking of Death Stranding, right after ours.
Well, we've had numbers in Kojima. Okay, good. Anyone else? What are you most hyped for right now?
South by Midnight.
South by Midnight. Okay, that's coming soon. Yeah, that's April. Yeah, that'll be a good one on Xbox. Anything else?
Tony Hawk.
And to play GTA 6. That's right. Should we show the next GTA? No,
We're going to be revealing the release date at the end of the... so stick around. No.
Totally. Anyways, yes, I know you guys you're in the business of getting hyped about games. We were in the business of creating hype. So yeah, we should talk about the hype cycle, right?
Good. All right.
By the way, these are some of the nicest slides I've ever seen in the presentation of Greg and they just put all together. So
having a creative team helps.
They even got a QR code there. Where does that lead?
That goes to, I don't know, what does it go to?
Our newsletter for offpace.com gaming.
Whoa. I love it. Okay, great.
So what is the hype cycle?
I know, what is the hype cycle? So, I would say now with we deal with this all the time with game companies. People always ask, when is this game going to be released and when are they going to announce it? There is no playbook anymore about how game companies talk about games, right? And you'll see at our shows something like Game Awards. Sometimes there'll be games that don't have dates on them, right? Sometimes there'll be games the year, last year we had a few games, I think said 2026 or 2027 at the end of the trailers. And it's always a debate about when do you announce a game? And sometimes people are like, let's announce it and let's ship it in 3 months. Other times people announce a game and say, hey, it's going to take 3 or 4 years. We saw some games, in Game Awards last year, like The Witcher or Intergalactic, which clearly are not shipping this year, right? No surprise on those. But so I think everyone's debating about, what is the right time to create hype, and then how do you maintain it, right? And that's one thing, we've all had those situations where we get hyped about a game, and it gets delayed and delayed and delayed, and even now everyone's like really hyped on GTA 6, but we're like, when is it coming? It's coming this fall. When do we see more? So it creates this constant excitement amongst the fan base. But when do people get too excited? Then the expectations go so high that then we get disappointed, right? Expectation management is something that we think about a lot with the game companies. So you see here sort of, I guess, the general kind of phases of a hype cycle on a game, if you want to kind of couch it in that form. And it's like the announcement of it, right? When you sort of first tease the game that it exists, and we hope that we surprise people at our shows. And Greg knows that when he works on shows with game publishers. You ideally, you hope things aren't spoiled. We worry about leaks, right? And like for us, some of the most amazing moments are for me and my team are when we have true surprises at the Game Awards. Like last year, we had a great moment where Okami, a classic game from almost 2 decades ago, came back, and we really surprised the world that it was coming back. And the original creator of it, Kamiya-san, was partnered with Capcom. That was a secret that we held for probably 6 months. I was in Japan last July when they first told me that this was going to happen. We were going to do a deal and put it together for the show. But every day I would just wake up and just be in fear of I hope it doesn't leak, because I want the actual announcement to be magical, and you see the co-streamers and everyone freaking out as part of it. So ideally you have an amazing announcement that really is truly the announcement of a game and not a leak. And that could be anywhere from a few months out to years out, right? And the Okami game, they hadn't even started production on it. It really was basically just starting last year, and that trailer was really more of a concept piece of what they hope the game will ultimately be. So that's going to be a while till that one's out. And then you have sort of, other sort of coming soon teaser phases, we're calling sort of the coming soon phase, where a game is announced, but you're revealing kind of new features or new content on the game. And a well-done game campaign has something new to say every time, right? It's like it used to be, we're going to reveal the multiplayer, or we're going to reveal a new map, or we're going to reveal the co-op campaign, or something new. So just kind of build anticipation, because what you don't want in some games, we've all seen those games where they put out so many trailers, you're like, oh my god, well, the game just come out, and it's like, I've seen enough, or they're spoiling too much of the game, I want to be surprised, right? It used to be a thing years ago where you'd play a game and you're like, I've seen all 8 of these levels because they put out all these trailers. So you want to ideally show some stuff, but keep people teased. And then you have the launch of the game, which is a big moment, obviously, where you want to get people hyped and playing it. And then what's new, I think, over the past half-decade is the idea of post-launch content and ongoing games. And that's the idea that, you don't just kind of, it used to be you ship a game, it would come out, we'd all play it for a couple weeks, and then we'd move on to the next thing. Now, as we know, every month, 8 out of the top 10 games are the same 8 games that people are playing month after month after month. And those are, ongoing live service games or other multiplayer games, DLCs, right? There are extensions like Elden Ring, Night Rain, different kind of game, but that's kind of building on the Elden Ring lore. That's coming out in May. So, that's what's interesting now is the hype, ideally, doesn't just kind of peak at launch and go down. You actually kind of continue to maintain it with fans, over a long period of time, which is not an easy thing to do.
Absolutely. Should we jump right in and actually talk about, some...
We got some case studies?
Where hype goes well and where it absolutely doesn't.
Okay, well here's one that did super great, Elden Ring. That was an amazing campaign. We were lucky to be a part of that. So that was first teased and announced at the Xbox E3 briefing in 2019, I believe, with a CG piece, and basically announced the idea that From, this legendary Japanese game developer that had done, incredible number of games, Demon Souls, Dark Souls, was bringing a brand new IP with George R.R. Martin, obviously the author of Game of Thrones and many other, incredible works. And he was teaming up with From to create a game. It was really a CG piece. I don't know if you guys remember it. It was kind of a beautiful, evocative piece of this world, but basically just said, From Software, George R.R. Martin, are making a game. And that was kind of the initial announcement of it. And then, if you remember, everyone was like, well, when do we see the game? When do we see the game? And originally we had talked about, the original plan was we were going to show that, I think, at that year at Game Awards. in 2019, but the game just, they weren't ready. And then obviously we got into COVID, and a lot of things happened. So it wasn't until, I think it was Summer Game Fest 2021, when we were able to show everyone the first gameplay trailer, which was a big moment for us at the end of that Summer Game Fest show in the middle of COVID, that we got to show people the first gameplay trailer. And every show we had done between E3 2019 and there, every show's like, where's Elden Ring? Where's Elden Ring? What's going on? They just weren't ready, right? So it took a little bit longer, but we got to reveal the gameplay at Summer Game Fest in 21. We actually announced, I think, from what I remember, we announced the release date for the next January, which I think got moved to March, but it still was like, yeah, it was coming early in 22. And that was an amazing moment. We closed the show with that, and that was incredible. And then they had a really tight campaign, right? So they had to wait a while from the announcement to when they first started showing the game. But when they did show the game, it was a very quick, 8 months until it shipped. And it worked super great. And obviously then when the game came out, Greg will tell you too, it's like the game is great. Now so much of it is about the word of mouth and the social conversation that's created around the game that, you can have my show, my shows are an ingredient, but they are by no means the full meal. And it's like, you gotta have influencers who are into playing it, you're gonna have people talking about how great it is. And Elden Ring just took on a life of its own. It's what came out and was obviously ended up winning Game of the Year that year at Game Awards.
Yeah, it did. They just, that campaign was flawless from beginning to end, pretty much.
Flawless?
Yeah. Masterclass. Clearly it's Game of the Year. It sold 12 million copies within, a few weeks of launch. And I guess the story, the message there is that, quality over quantity will win time and time again when it comes to,
And I think also waiting for the right moment, because I remember, everyone's like, where's Elden Ring, where's Elden Ring? And every show we do, the Game Awards, I can't believe Elden Ring wasn't there, what happened?
Right.
And then finally, when, it showed, it was great that they were finally ready to show it. That's why a lot of times, develop like the one now everyone keeps talking about is like Hollow Knight Silksong. It's like, where is it? Where is it? It's like they're working away on it, they're just not ready to show it. And I think a lot of teams now are like, hey, we're gonna wait until we're really ready. We know that it's gonna come out and we can start talking about it versus just putting out a trailer every year, for 5 years, right?
Yeah.
So Elden Ring and From are such an amazing studio. But obviously they did the Shadow of the Earth Tree expansion. And now we just, last year at Game Awards we announced Night Rain, which is coming out in May, and it's they're a very prolific studio and incredible team.
Awesome. Let's move on. Okay, so how about when a similar strategy goes very wrong? So Alien Colonial Marines, it's an older title, but a very relevant case study.
From Gearbox here in Texas, right?
Yes, from Gearbox and Sega as a publisher. They too launched with a preview trailer, but I think where things really went wrong for them was the trailer was all pre-rendered and was not indicative.
They used to call them bull shots, remember?
Yeah, bull shots, yeah.
Bull shots. It's like fake. I was thinking back in the day,
Yeah.
people put together these fake screenshots of games,
Right.
and they pose these, models and things, and you pretend it was the game, and it actually wasn't the game. And this was, a thing that was a practice for a long time. People do, we always hate the CG trailer, right, where it's sort of like, this isn't the game. And now with Unreal Engine 5, it's like, actually the in-game cinematics are real time, and they're actually, almost as good as CG. Like the piece we did on The Witcher 4 at Game Awards, that was actually rendered in Unreal Engine. I think that is going to, basically, ideally is what the game will be. But yeah, back in the day, people would do these sort of concept CG pieces that would sell you a promise, and then when you could see the game, you'd be like, wait, downgrade, right? And that would be the thing. I think it was always Ubisoft always would get hit on that, of like the Ubisoft downgrade, which would be like, you start here, and then eventually the game comes out and it's there. So this was obviously kind of one of the worst examples of this. This was probably a good decade ago, right?
Yeah, 2013, maybe 2016. Yeah, it was a ways away. Yeah, it was just it's bad news all around. I think that.
And you get into this vicious cycle because then you create all this hype, and then as I talked about managing expectations, and then people see something, they get excited, and then you get into this hole, and you try and dig yourself out of the hole, but you actually dig deeper into the hole, and you can never recover. It happens in a lot of games where you hype people so much get all this anticipation. That happened even, something like a couple years ago, we announced the Wonder Woman game at Game Awards. It was going to come out from DC and Warner Brothers, and just a couple weeks ago they announced it was canceled, right? And it's one of those things where like people were hyped for 2 or 3 years with this amazing, CG Wonder Woman. You're like, oh, this game, I can't wait. And every show I do, people are like, oh, you're going to show the Wonder Woman game. And it's like, no, we weren't. Happened too, there's a Transformers game a couple years ago. We did Transformers Reactivate. Every show, people are like, when are you showing Transformers? And that game got canceled. So, that's it. You can get people too hyped too early, and it can, ultimately lead to disappointment.
Yeah. I guess the results of that marketing campaign were pretty brutal for both Gearbox.
It was a class action suit, I think, right?
There was a class action lawsuit that the fans brought against the title, and Sega had to pay out like $1 million+ to settle. So yeah, that's the lessons
When hype goes wrong.
Lessons learned, yeah. So moving on, why don't we talk a little bit about, kind of like over-promising and under-delivering. When you hype up your game so much, and then, here comes the launch, and you're not meeting those expectations.
Right, and we're talking about No Man's Sky and Cyberpunk. There's a silver line to these stories because these games ultimately had a redemption arc, as you said. Yeah, No Man's Sky was a game we announced in 2013 at the VGX Awards with me and Joel McHale, from a small studio in Guildford, England called Hello Games. They had done an Xbox Live Arcade game called Joe Danger, which I really loved, and Sean Murray, the main guy there. One day I was in his office in Guildford, and he showed me this idea of this crazy space game they wanted to do. And we announced it at VGX, and people were just taken by this incredible game. You guys all remember, where you're kind of like literally underwater, and then you're on the surface, and then you're flying in space.
Infinite planets to explore, multiplayer.
Exactly. Here's like everything you want in a space game. It was made by 6 people or something, right? So there's obviously a limit to sort of even procedurally what you could do. So that game came out, and there were supposed promises of multiplayer and all these other things that weren't in the
space battles.
In the V1 that they shipped. So they got a lot of hate in sort of 2015 when the game came out for sort of basically hyping people up with this incredible trailer, delivering a game that wasn't in your mind's eye, right? That expression was sort of like what you sort of think it's going to be. You always look at these things through sort of rose-colored glasses and hope it's going to be better than it is, and it wasn't. But to the credit of Sean and that team, even though they had a rocky launch, they've been spending a decade upgrading that game, doing expansions. I was just with him in London last week, and they've never charged players a cent for anything that they put out in the past 10 years of that game. And they've really built this incredible experience, an incredible game. So it's always a good story, I think, of a game that had a rocky start, hyped people in a big way, disappointed, but over time they've really built back their community. An amazing redemption arc. That's what's cool about games. It's taken them, took them 8 or 10 years to get there, but now it's, Steam reviews are overly positive for it. It's been an amazing success story. So that's one where, they people love to hate No Man's Sky, and now Sean's like a hero on the internet. It's possible for all of us.
Absolutely. I think, Cyberpunk, it's a similar story for Cyberpunk, right? A lot of hype. At first, they rushed the game out to get it out.
Disastrous one. I was remember when that came out. It came out the same day as Game Awards. I think in 2020. I think it was COVID, and that's where Sony. Remember they offered people like refunds. I think for the game.
They took it off
the store.
It was a big deal.
And that was another one that just had years of hype at E3, and there was all these demos. Everyone was like, "Oh my God, this game is the future of everything." And it came out, and it was not great. But then they, with 2.0, Phantom Liberty, they kind of redeemed themselves again. That Cyberpunk sold an incredible number of copies. I remember at the beginning, but people were really disappointed with it. So I think the good story here is that games, I think you can win back the internet, which everyone thinks is impossible. But if you really, over time, I think the gaming audience generally, really, you can be redeemed if you keep focused and give value back to the fans.
So what do you think the lesson here is? Is that the lesson,
No, I don't think anyone sets out to ship a game like this, right? I think the lesson is really that if you can commit over time, even if something starts rocking, you can sort of build, right? I think anything in life, or I think if people have, tough patches or whatever, it's sort of this idea of, you need that resilience to be able to kind of rebound and build, and there is hope. And I think, it's like anything, I think you want to think that there is opportunity to improve and to win people back, right? And everyone loves a redemption story, especially in America, right? And sort of, people coming back off the ropes and becoming victorious. So I think the lesson here is really that, like, even if it feels that, a game has gone off rails, there is opportunity potential. And it takes, commitment, it takes resources. We know lots of game developers will ship a game and they're like, I'm done with this, I don't ever want to touch it again. It's like, I want to move on to the next thing, I want closure. So this can't happen for every game. But these are two examples, I think, of games that had an incredible amount of hype, that didn't meet expectations, but over time have been able to, win back the fame.
Move on. Let's talk about some interesting titles where maybe, instead of coming out with a huge marketing campaign, they take a different strategy. They take a product-led strategy, letting the game speak for itself.
These are fun ones.
Yeah.
How World was an insane game in 2024, came out in January 2024, and this was made by a small studio in Tokyo, Japan. I remember meeting the guy who made this, Mizurobe-san, at Tokyo Game Show, I think in 2023. He was a kid who just dreamed of being on our shows. Has a backpack, he showed up, and he's like, they didn't even have a booth. He's like, I'll meet you by the Sonic statue at TGS, the Sega booth, and I want to pitch you this game. And this was a game that came out of nowhere. We showed it at Summer Game Fest in 2023. And it's basically, as we know, there's an ongoing lawsuit around this. It is, Pokemon with guns, right? And sort of, was an insane game that, came out in January 24 and set the internet on fire, right, on Steam. And that's what I think is interesting, is even though there was some hype, this was a game that we did a fair amount with in our Summer Game Fest show a couple years ago. People were excited about it. But it was made by an independent publisher, right? That's the other interesting thing, is the game industry has moved from EA, Activision, Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo to Pocket Pair, which is just a Japanese game developer who can put a game up on Steam, and to the credit of Valve, that they built with Steam, this game can amass 10 million plus copies very quickly, because it's just viral and fun and different. And obviously now with influencers and the community and social, that can really be something that can take a game even further than any kind of paid marketing, right? I'm in the business of selling people ads in our shows and whatnot, but it's like that's an ingredient, it's not everything. Yeah, Power World was an amazing success story of something that sort of came out of nowhere and had some hype, but the hype really came from the players, right? It was sort of generated from the community. Same thing with Among Us. I mean, that was another one that that team, Forrest and that team was, had shipped that game on Steam, and in its first 6 months, the maximum concurrent players they had, I think, was like 80 players that had played the game for the first 6 months. But then the streamer and influencer culture sort of started playing this game, and streamers like Disguised Toast and some others started playing it, and it went from 80 players to millions of players in the span of a couple of weeks. Everyone knows Among Us. I mean, a small, indie 2D game that was just a ton of fun to play with other people, right? And that's where, I think the power of the player community driving awareness and influencer streams. We're seeing that this week with Split Fiction, the new game from Joseph Ferris. Just an amazing, fun co-op game, and it's great for streamers. It's great for people to play with people, and that creates hype in and of itself, right? I mean, it's not unexpected that a great game is all you need for hype.
Yeah. I think, interestingly enough, also with Among Us, it's also kind of right time, right place, right? It kind of hit during the pandemic.
Good point. Yes.
A lot of people were needing something to connect with their friends. Among Us, being a multiplayer game where everybody can play together, I think was really.
Yep. And again, with the power of distribution platform like Steam, these guys had no publisher; they just basically did it themselves. And I think we really spent next to $0 on marketing.
Zero.
It was just them building and anticipation amongst fans. So that was a great one. And then Wukong was another one, which was up for Game of the Year at Game Awards. And that's an incredible story of a Chinese-developed game that, came out of really nowhere. And did incredibly well on Steam and on PlayStation, with, massive production values. And we had featured it a couple times in our shows over the years. And that was I think the thing that I found a lot in the past decade is the global aspect of gaming has blown me away. And the player base in China, especially for that game, right, sold incredibly well based on, Journey to the West. Something people in China especially really know that story and associate with it. And it sold an incredible number of copies on Steam. The thing that has blown me away with our show and the nature of gaming is how global it is, right? Even Split Fiction, it's like, Joseph's games are big and people love them here, but in China, they're massive. So yeah, I think the global aspect of hype is something also to think about. People around the world really kind of do play a lot of the same games now, which is not the case, a decade ago.
You think Steam played a big role?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Steam is, I will say, Steam and what Valve has built, the global aspect of it is amazing. And you think of, traditionally it's like, console, PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, PC, Steam. I think you talk to a lot of developers, Steam and the global aspect of Steam, where, most games now, 20 to 30% of their sales are in China right now on Steam. It's incredible. And yeah, Steam, I think, has become sort of, in many ways, like the most powerful platform around the world, even bigger than the consoles in a lot of ways, I think, for, especially for these kind of games. I mean, these all really were, there was a little bit of mobile with Among Us, because that had a mobile version that did really well. But for Power World and Black Myth, those are unexpected publishers, developers from other parts of the world that have found massive global success, largely due, having a good game is part of it, but Steam is really, I think, the common ingredient there.
Just another tool in the hype cycle.
I know.
Speaking of tools in the hype cycle.
Oh, here comes the self-promotional slide, right?
How does experiential and kind of live and also live streaming, video events play into hype?
Yeah, look, I grew up loving live events, right? For me, like one of the first E3 I went to, I remember going to the press conferences. I remember, meeting Michael Jackson at the PlayStation 1 party in 1995 at E3. I remember, seeing the first Mario 64 demo at Nintendo's E3 press conference in 1996 at Space World, in Japan. So I'm a big fan of the building experiences around games, right? And that's one of the things that I think, all our shows, Game Awards, Summer Game Fest, Gamescom, and live feature live audiences and have this magic of sort of a stage show, which used to be a big thing that, Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft would do, these big press conferences, right? And largely, a lot of the gaming companies have moved towards these digital video events, which are, playlists of trailers with, sometimes there are people on camera and other things around them, but generally are just folks on that. And to me, I love, it's scary, it's expensive, it's crazy, but we love to do these live events, these crazy moments that hopefully can surprise people. So we've been able to build those over the past decade, and we do 3 of them a year. And the thing that I live for, right, are those moments where we have a live audience. And if you're in the room, or hopefully if you're watching, something like the Game Awards at home, when you hear the crowd roar and go crazy, and we surprise people. Like there was a moment 2 years ago where we had the God of War DLC, and we had this moment where there was just, a lake, and all of a sudden you see Kratos, and as soon as he just appears, everyone goes nuts in the crowd. And like that energy, I think, is so magical, and really it's a type of hype, right? But it's something that really makes I think our events special. And you call them would you call them immersive live events? I like that. Yeah, so Game Awards is an immersive live event. We've been lucky with Game Awards that it's become it's partially obviously an award show, right? But it's also a vehicle to sort of announce games, and everyone here in the audience will probably have an opinion on whether it should be more of an award show or more of an announcement show. But we kind of try and strike a balance. We don't get it right every year, but we try and have these things where we recognize the best of the year, but also show you guys what's coming in the future. And we were lucky last year, we had probably I think our best Game Awards we've ever done. Now we live in fear of how we're gonna up ourselves this year. And it's not just us, right? That's the thing is our shows are nothing without the game developers and publishers that help us make these shows, right? So the thing, you talk about hype, you guys will probably see sometimes I'll go online and I'll be like, hey, by the way, like de-hype yourself because they're too high expectations for what we're gonna announce at one of these shows. And we are only lucky to have the games that are presented to us to be on our stages. So sometimes people can, put out these crazy lists on the internet of all the things that they think are going to be announced. You know that with like a state of play or something. People have all these crazy ideas of, wouldn't it be amazing that they announce, this? And I'm like, yeah, it'd be cool if they were making that game. It's not even being made, so how are we going to announce it at our show? Fans love to overhype themselves, but that's the things I will say what I call these black box events. By that I mean it's like these events where like anything could happen. When you have like an Xbox or a Nintendo Direct, for instance, coming out April 2nd for the Switch 2, and they're not going to tell you a thing, I'm sure, before that about what's going to be there. So the hype is off the charts because it's like, oh my God, what about a new Zelda, a new Mario, a new Metroid, and blah blah blah. And, what if they brought this back? Most of that stuff might not be there, but it's that expectation of anything can kind of happen.
It's that one more thing.
You're living the world, right? Of like, what is that one more thing? What do you have? You have a strong open, a strong close. So these events are really powerful, but they also come with a lot of expectations about the amount of hype that's supposed to be inside of these events. And some years we'll have good events, some years we'll have okay events. We still carry on, but that's the thing I live in fear of. Like, we never want to disappoint our audiences, right? My audience is people like you, people who watch our shows. If you're kind enough to give us 2 or 3 hours of your time, we want to be able to deliver against that. We can't always. And also everyone, I've learned, different people have different expectations. So a game that is like super meaningful to you will be different than someone else. Like even Okami last year, that's a game that I loved 18 years ago. There are people now watching my shows that weren't even born when that game came out.
I'm super excited about the Fumitu Ueda-san's.
Yes, Ueda's game, Gen-design. Yes, that was beautiful. That robot game. And that was another one. Cool. And that was one that you really have to know his games, Eco and Last Guardian and Shadow. But he's an amazing creator. I talked to him. That was 5 years ago. I had lunch with him. And he said, hey, I want to announce my game at your show. It took us 5 years to get there with him. So we're always working on these things. Generally I will say the hype of these big events can be great, but it also can create, a lot of expectations.
Double-edged sword. Yeah. I think also what's interesting, like with State of Play or Nintendo Direct is, to your point, these used to be grand press conferences at E3 where it was like the one time of the year where you hold all your cards and show them. But that's, because there is no more E3 and there are very few, those types of events, with the exception of Summer Games Fest, maybe PAX. Like these are ways to tap directly. It's like a line, right into the audience.
And we know people are going to show up. That's the thing that, a lot of people sometimes say, well, do we even need these things anymore? Because companies can talk direct to consumers or creates too much hype. And what I love about, these shows is that we know people are going to tune in. So if there's a new team out there or a new IP that we believe in, we can put it inside our show and we can expose that game to tens of millions of people, which they're just never going to get that momentum. And we had, last year you guys remember Summer Games, we had this game called Cuff Bus, which was like a bunch of little koalas breaking out of jail. And koala bears, right? This kid, Gavin, who's like a 20-year-old kid up in Seattle, just lone developer. I found him one day on Steam. I'm like, this would be cool. We should put this in our show. And all of a sudden, you can kind of take something that's really cool and expose it to a bunch of people. So we think a lot about that in our shows, about how do we have, we're going to have the big Kojima trailer or the Naughty Dog trailer, but also what are the smaller games that we can put in there. And we think a lot about curating these events, right? And I think people may not realize how much time we do spend working on the creative and the emotional arc of these shows. If you look at what we did last year at Game Awards, there's a reason we started with The Witcher, we had Okami near the end, Intergalactic, that's all months of kind of planning and thinking about, what's the right cadence of how to deliver that for those shows. And you do that, same with State of Play, Sony thinks about that, or Nintendo Direct. And fans have insane expectations, and there's nothing worse for me when, I live in fear of every show that you started, and then you may just not have the goods one year, right? It's like, I don't have one more thing, what do you do? And that's why people often say to us, why don't you do more shows every year? And it's like, no, we can't do anymore, because I think even doing 3 of them, there's not enough content to really support doing, something every month.
Agreed. Let's talk about a couple more.
Okay.
So this is Apex Legends is a really good example of a stealth launch, right? There was
Shadow drop.
Shadow drop, exactly. Just let the game out and let people play it.
Yeah, that was an amazing event. I remember. It was right around the Super Bowl. I forget what year it was. But it was, they had basically all that was when, streamers know, the biggest thing in the world, right? Like everyone's streaming on Twitch and YouTube, and I remember being in the room where it was like Ninja and all these other streamers. I mean, I think half of them have been canceled by now, but it's like a lot of these people that just sort of like we're all together, streaming, playing games, and they basically had all of us play it, and then they announced the game and launched it effectively all at the same time, and it was an amazing experience. I think a lot of companies have tried it since then and haven't really been able to duplicate the magic of Apex and having sort of everybody streaming. And that was, also around the world. I think global streamers flying in. They must have spent so much money flying everyone in, paying content creators to create content around that game. And again, it worked because it was an amazing game. And it was a Respawn, right? And I think I've met a lot of people since then. And we get that pitched often with our show, like, hey, I want to announce my game at Game Awards, ship it, launch it, all at the same time. And it's a really difficult thing to get right. And this was sort of lightning in a bottle. But Apex, and Apex I think has struggled a little bit over the past couple of years. It's really hard to maintain that excitement. But yeah, that was a special moment when Apex first came out for sure.
Yeah. Let's talk about Death Stranding.
There you go. Death Stranding is, we've had obviously a great relationship with Mr. Kojima over the decades, really. What I love about him is he really, he loves to create a spectacle, right? When we first announced Death Stranding 2 at Game Awards a couple of years ago, he always is leveraging, interesting talent around his announcements, right?
There's a lot of ambiguity with his trailers.
We've done some legendary stuff with him over the years. I was just at the Severance panel earlier, and Adam Scott, I forgot that at the VGAs in 2012, he came out and announced this game, which was called The Phantom Pain at the time, which actually was Metal Gear Solid 5. But Adam came out and announced this game. Yeah, and it was like, Adam Scott, he had nothing to do with the game, he just was like, let's do this. Mark S. on stage announcing, ended up being The Phantom Pain, and that was sort of, Kojima trying to do this sort of, riddle of sort of, and he loves playing with the audiences, right? And that's the thing, he really thinks of how to do interesting campaigns, different campaigns.
History.
Yeah, he leads into that. He likes to have fun with his fans. And we love that. When we did the OD announcement a couple of years ago with him at Game Awards, where he came out of the door, and Jordan Peele came out, and it was just like he's very fun to work with, right? That's what I love is my team and our production team on Game Awards love to collaborate with people and do special things. And he is one of those that I'm excited for his panel in an hour here is going to be amazing, and I encourage all of you to go over there because he's got some. Definitely, if you're a Death Stranding fan, today will be a good day for you.
Awesome. Let's wrap it up with one more. Let's talk about Hogwarts Legacy from Warner Brothers. Particularly this one, their launch, the way they leveraged hype was through a lot of UGC, user-generated content. Again, kind of letting their fans help drive the marketing.
Yeah, this was a game that I think over-delivered compared to what people expected.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it was one of those ones, obviously, in the Harry Potter IP, there was obviously the massive IP, but I think people were curious about how it was going to do. And it was, again, a great game. They did a really good job, I think, creating a lot of content across all the social platforms. And I will say now, I'm amazed how many indie games, especially, will go viral on TikTok. that's what it takes to drive, install base and awareness and whatnot. And I think what was good about this game is that even though it was an IP as big as Harry Potter and Hogwarts, Warner's really, the content community really kind of created a lot of content around it. They got people incredibly excited. They obviously, worked with influencers and streamers and all that around it. But that was, another game that just I think over-delivered for sure compared to expectations on that at a time when Warner Brothers was generally sort of, struggling. This game really was the one that, just had again, lightning in the bottle again.
Yeah, absolutely. They ended up selling like 22 million copies by the end of 2023, so it definitely did well. It was one of the best-selling games of that year, and also apparently the top-selling physical game of 2023. So they
wasn't nominated for Game of the Year at the Game Awards, though. Controversy.
Did it win anything? I can't remember.
Didn't win anything.
Did you hear about it?
I heard about it.
Sure you did. Great. Why don't we take a few minutes? If anybody in the audience is interested in throwing out a couple questions our way, we'd be happy to.
Uh-oh, here comes the dangerous part.
We have about probably 5 or 6 minutes.
Awesome.
Go for it.
Hello.
Hello, hey. Greg, thanks a lot for having this panel. I had a question about the hype cycle in terms of length of time. So there's 2 particular cases that I think about in terms of well-known IP. One of them is Fallout, the other one is Grand Theft Auto. When I think of Fallout 4, they did a very tight campaign from announcing at E3 a decade ago, and then had a release in November. Grand Theft Auto 6, very different. Over a year ago, December 2023, they released their trailer. Got 69 million views the first day. Now at 244 million views, nothing's happened for this year. We're not going to see it for another year. So between those 2 very different sides of the spectrum, what should game publishers and developers look at, or what a successful campaign looks like?
Yeah, it's a good question. And yeah, for a while, the Fallout campaign was actually like something people call out, right? Of like, oh, it was, it was like May or June. Todd Howard did like a 30-minute demo. Or that was Dolby Theater, he did that demo, and then the game shipped that November. And a lot of people were like, oh, we're going to do shorter campaigns now. Because back when Greg and I were doing magazines, it would be sometimes there'd be like 3 or 4 year campaigns, right? Because we would do a cover story, and then they'd like come back a year later. And part of that was just because the games would get delayed, right? So they'd have more time. And I think that's, there's always a debate, I think, about like, when do you announce a game? And release dates in games, do move. Like there's, even now, Grand Theft Auto, a lot of people are like, is it really coming this fall, right? We've seen one thing, that's the only thing we've ever seen. It's hard to know, right? So I would say, there's no playbook or one right way to do it. And sometimes people will announce things for a variety of different reasons, right? I can't tell you how many games get announced in our show because, someone wants to, they're worried about it leaking, right? So they're like, let's get it out there before it leaks to the internet. Or people often even announce things for because they want to recruit people to, work on this game and things like that. So there are many factors that go into it. And I always get a question, oh, is it too early to start this campaign? And it depends on the game. It depends on, if you're a new IP from a new studio, that's a different play than the next Fallout game.
Right, trying to choose sequel. Is there a sweet spot?
I don't know. It changes. But I would say generally, I think that what we're seeing now is that campaigns are actually getting a little bit longer. What we're finding now is that with like Steam and wish listing and whatnot, it's actually better to have multiple beats because people, wish lists are one way that people kind of measures early success of a game or interest, right? It used to be pre-orders at GameStop. Nobody really needs to pre-order anymore because you're getting most things digitally. But the wish list on Steam is one metric to sort of see, you have built-in momentum, and typically around 20 to 25% of your wish list will initially convert on Steam. So I think what we found is you can, if you have, say, one show, you show up at Summer Game Fest and announce your game, and then it ships in September, only gives you, like 1 or 2 moments to get your wish list up. But if you do 3 shows, you tend to sort of get incrementally more wish lists. There's not diminishing returns, right? Where it's like everyone sees it at one show, the next show, no one wish lists it. There are new people that discover games, and that tends to make most publishers believe, hey, it's better to maybe have a couple bites at the apple. So I think the Fallout model was very popular for a while, like let's have a tight 6-month campaign. I think generally things are getting a little bit longer right now.
I think it's also you have to have the right content, right, throughout that campaign, right?
Yes, in some games, it's a great point, right? Because some games can support, a 2-year campaign. Other games, you're like, there's not a lot to say. It's like, and you don't want to, run out of fuel. There are lots of, if you're a marketer in the game industry, you've all gone through this where it's like, a game gets delayed and you're like, oh my God, we have nothing else to talk about, right? Because it's like, we already revealed all our features. How do we keep people hyped about it? And, then Geoff rejected us from Game Awards. We have nothing new to talk about. And it's like, not their fault. It's just the game got delayed. So I would say generally the campaigns are getting a little bit longer, but there are lots of examples of people, doing things in different ways and still finding success.
Absolutely.
Hi, Jeff. Greg. Thanks for doing the
Of course.
You guys mentioned post-launch hype cycles, so I was wondering if you can kind of go into that a little bit more, like what you see from player behavior or what metrics you see that would be long term success.
Yeah, I mean, the post-launch is really important, and I would say there's the post-launch is conversation around games, right? And sort of, people in the community kind of finding games. And I think there are lots of examples of games that kind of do okay initially, but over time grow. Like even Split Fiction, I think like day one did pretty good, but this weekend it's like on fire. It's sort of, builds anticipation over time. So I think there's lots of examples of games that the word of mouth is like really, really key, and like player reviews on Steam and things like that. People bring a lot of that, right? It's sort of like, hey, our reviews
Absolutely.
are, negative on Steam. That's going to really affect hype, and especially with single player games now. You kind of have a week or two where you really have to, own the conversation, or the big games are getting bigger, and there's not a lot of middle ground. And then post-launch content. I think, Fortnite's probably the best example of a brand that just continually just releases new things, right? I think it's like every week there's like a new IP collab, there's new content. And what's cool about that is it creates conversation not only on social, but for streamers and people, like things to talk about, right?
That conversation going.
And that's just like, you talk to content creators, you're like, oh cool, at least Fortnite has something new to talk about. So I can say there's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and now Peter Griffin's in it, and now Batman, and so, it's just like stuff to talk about. So I think they've done the best job of anyone of having a content pipeline that continually surprises audiences, and again, benefits me and, things I do, because there's stuff to talk about, but also the content creators and community, because, each content creator usually wakes up in the morning and it's like, what am I going to post today? And they're trying to think of something. And it's like, oh wait, this game has something new. I can create a TikTok about that. It's the currency that people deal with is new content. So I think games that kind of have a very frequent deployment of content is better than, it used to be like, hey, we're going to do a DLC pack in 6 months. And it's like, no, it's actually better. Like, you need to have content like week 1, week 2, like when you're launching, and that's sometimes hard when you're shipping a game, is that all the team wants to do is ship the game and go on vacation, right? And it's like, you actually, the most important weeks are post-launch for a lot of games right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, from a marketing perspective, if your game is really good, like you can keep that conversation going. Like Elden Ring, part of their marketing campaign was like, the game is out, people are talking about it, and it's gotten great reviews, so we're going to now do a whole campaign just around accolades.
Right.
It's like,
yeah, once you, light the fire and it keeps spinning up, like that's happening right now with Split Fiction. It happened with like Marvel Rivals over the holidays, right? Like everyone was playing it, and it sort of, creates this top spin that everyone just wants to be a part of it, and that's really what it takes now. And again, Marvel Rivals is like an hour now, so Fantastic Four is coming, and there's just like all this content. So the post-launch is really, in many ways, even more vital than the pre-launch stuff. And I always say our shows are important, but some people are like, our game ships 2 weeks before Summer Game Fest, we're not doing any marketing anymore. I'm like, no, you should actually be starting.
Yeah.
There's a reason that Netflix spends most of their marketing money actually after a show is out, right? Because it's actually available and you can go and consume it. Apple will guide people on mobile to actually start promotion when your app is actually in the store. don't get it. So yeah, I still there are a lot of people that are trained to be old, kind of how you market games. And actually, it's the best time to market and drive attention is when the game is actually out.
Absolutely. I think we have time for one more.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, it's become such an integral part of the Game Awards. What's it like working with the Muppets as an IP?
Great question. I saw Cookie Monster this morning. I'm excited. Not a Muppet. Yeah, the Muppet stuff is really fun for me. And I grew up loving the Muppets. And I think at some point I was like, when I started Game Awards, it was just, I kind of wanted to do the show I wanted to do in a weird way, right? And for a long time I worked at a television network where like we made, I was proud of a lot of shows we did, but there were a lot of, people you had to go through, and I was like, finally I was gonna like make the show I want to make. And it was, I think, we tried for years like to get in touch with the Muppets, so we didn't even know how to get in touch with them, right? It was like a hard thing. And then in 2018, I think we started because I had met one of the key Muppet performers, Bill Beretta. I had met him through someone, and we talked about the idea of like maybe we could do something with the Muppets. And the first thing we did was Pepe the Prom with Ninja. We did a fun bit at the Game Awards, and people just loved it. And then once I had my in with the Muppets, I'm like, let's get going. So pretty much every year now. I think it's the Muppets actually, really love it too, because they get a ton of attention and excitement around it. So it's fun every year to sort of think of what we're going to do with the Muppets. And yeah, we've kind of now we're like running out of Muppets to go to, because we've done the Swedish Chef, we've done Gonzo, we've done Stellar Waldorf. What?
You did Kermit, right?
We haven't done Kermit yet. No, that's why we were debating maybe doing Kermit last year, but then I was like, I don't want to do Stellar Waldorf. So yeah, it's a fun thing. I just think, I'm not a comedian. I don't go up and do a monologue. And to me, it's like they add sort of some fun and levity to to the show. And yeah, it's cute. And again, it's one of those things now it's expected almost every year. What are we going to do? And we have, it's really fun for me. And again, it's a personal point of pride. I just get so excited that the Muppets are coming. Most of our team does too. And I think the audience also, it's just such a random, weird thing that the Muppets they don't really have games, right? They're not really in games.
Who writes that? Who writes the lines?
It's a collaboration. It's I'm involved in some of it. There's a guy, Kyle Bossman, who is a writer on our show. There's Gabe, who's our writer that's been with us since the first Game Awards. So they work with it, but it's really it's us. It's the Muppet team, and I would say the Muppet performers. They're gamers. There was one, we did a thing with Animal a couple years ago, and I remember we had a line about Kojima, and the guy who performs Animal had this funny line where I could say Animal Good Night in Box, and I was like, oh, that's a fun Metal Gear reference. Yeah, and so it's really collaborative with them, and really funny. Yeah, we do have those are some of the most fun meetings we have, deciding which Muppet's going to be in the show, pitching it to the Muppets, getting them involved. So yeah, it's just a fun thing that we've done at Game Awards. People are like, why do you do them at all your shows? I'm like, no, we try and save it for Game Awards. I have no idea what we'll do this year. Maybe we won't do it this year, I don't know. There was one year, a couple years ago, we didn't do it because of some of the COVID stuff. But yeah, it's a fun thing for me, so I want to keep it going. And one day we'll get the Muppets and get their own game. There was a Muppet CD-ROM back in the mid-90s. It was so good. Oh, it was made by this company in Seattle called Starwave, I think it was, and it was so good. A live-action Muppet game. Nice.
Amazing. Okay, so we have our final closing slide, but I know you wanted to get into questions, so we can just, let's
do one more question. Let's get the people what they want, right?
Yeah, it's just a quick one. I'm not very knowledgeable with the game community, but I just wanted to ask, how do music artists kind of connect with the gaming industry and stuff like that to get the music in the games?
Music's a huge part of games. We love doing performances at our shows, right? Of popular artists. And I think, games have so much gameplay. There's so much opportunity for music. So there's, obviously there's sort of instrumental score pieces of games, and there's just songs in games. But I would say, I'd say look at the indie game community, and there are a lot of really amazing games on Steam and things like that you can pitch your music to. And yes, like getting your song in Madden or something is like an opportunity, but I also think there's so much opportunity with other smaller titles that, would love to kind of collaborate and do things with musicians. So yeah, music is a big part of the experience. We do a huge orchestra every year at the Game Awards, performing the themes of games. So yeah, I think there's actually a ton of opportunity.
Yeah, it reminds me of, EA did, there was a time, this is a long time ago, where EA really leaned in heavy to finding those indie artists, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll leave it here, I think.
We'll leave it here. We got to get to Kojima's panel over at Ballroom D. So maybe we'll see you guys over there.
Everybody.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, everybody. Have a great South by Southwest.